If the universe is full of ancient alien civilizations, why do we see no sign of them? What if they are out there, but locked in a cold war of silence and shadow? Today, we are returning to two of our favorite topics, hypothetical alien civilizations and the Fermi Paradox, the big question of where all those immense and ancient alien empires are in a universe so much vaster and older than our own world. One popular explanation is that these empires might be dormant, sleeping giants waiting the right moment to act. Another widely discussed idea in recent years is the dark forest theory or the broader dark galaxy hypothesis. We've examined their pros and cons before, but today I want to add a new twist, imagining what conflicts between such hidden empires might look like in a dark galaxy. We'll also explore another angle, the behavior of IBC civilizations in this kind of environment. But first, what exactly is the dark forest or dark galaxy hypothesis? What is an IBC? And why might aliens voluntarily go dormant or cease openly expanding? These are intriguing if somewhat grim questions, best contemplated with a drink and a snack, so grab yours while we settle in for a deep dive into the dark ocean of space and the sharks that might swim its seas. If that sounds like fun, don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons. Now, the core idea behind dark forest theory and the dark galaxy hypothesis is that the universe might be full of old civilizations, but they stay quiet out of fear, typically of an even older, more advanced, and potentially predatory civilizations. It is never quite clear why those even older primordial civilizations aren't very loud themselves. While the general concept has existed for some time, the name Dark Forest comes from Liu Cixin's 2008 Three-Body Problem series, where it serves as the title of the second novel. Like many science fiction-inspired solutions, the Fermi Paradox makes for a compelling story, but it has its weaknesses. The logic behind Dark Forest theory is compelling at first glance, and follows from a few fundamental assumptions. 1. Life naturally arises in many places. 2. Technological progress varies, creating a mix of weaker and stronger civilizations. 3. It is impossible to know the true intentions of another species. And 4. Interstellar warfare or extermination is a viable survival strategy. And we examined that last one in detail a few months back in our xenocide episode. Given these factors, the safest course of action for any civilization is to eliminate potential threats before they become rivals, leading to a chilling cosmic silence. The absence of detectable extraterrestrial signals may not be due to a lack of alien life, but rather because those who broadcast their existence tend to be swiftly eliminated. They get wiped out, victims of xenocide. We've taken a detailed look at dark forest theory before, twice in fact, and the problem is that none of its core assumptions really holds up, except maybe the first, and they really all need to function reasonably well for the idea to hold. And even then, there is little margin for error before the whole idea collapses. Let's break that down. The first assumption seems the safest, that life arises naturally in many places. But the truth is, we have no idea how often life actually emerges, nor should we assume that life is inevitable or even natural in the way we typically think. More importantly, when discussing the Fermi Paradox, what we are really asking about is intelligent life. Many biologists are far more skeptical than sci-fi enthusiasts when it comes to assuming that intelligence is a natural evolutionary outcome. That's not to say intelligence is inherently unnatural, though we also can't rule out possibilities like a simulation, alien intervention, divine creation, or sheer statistical improbability, but it may be an extremely rare and freakish evolutionary path. Some suggest that intelligence is so rare that no other examples exist in this galaxy, or even in our supercluster. That's actually the default position on this channel. As I often say, it's not that I think ultra-rare intelligence is a great Fermi Paradox solution, but rather that it's the least bad one, since all of them have glaring flaws. But this first assumption is really just the core issue of the Fermi Paradox itself. There's no paradox if intelligent life is simply exceptionally uncommon in the first place, And while we still call it a paradox, that's really just a nod to the original name. Not many people think it's an actual logical contradiction, just an unsolved problem, likely based on flawed assumptions. Speaking of assumptions, let's move to the next one, that technological progress varies, creating a mix of weaker and stronger civilizations. On the surface, this seems reasonable. The galaxy is 13 billion years old, and rocky planets around stable stars have probably existed for billions of years longer than Earth. If intelligent life evolved on thousands of worlds, each would have emerged at a different time and at different rates of technological progress. Even if we assume that all life-bearing planets formed at the same time, or that some galactic catastrophe wiped everything out 4 billion years ago, we'd still expect variations in planetary formation and evolution. If evolutionary variation caused even a 1% deviation over a 4 billion year timeline, that's a 40 million year difference, almost as long as the time since dinosaurs went extinct, and a tenth the time length that life has been on land. More importantly, that's 400 times longer than it takes light to cross the entire galaxy, and about 10 times longer than it would take for a spaceship to do so, even using the slowest realistic interstellar designs like the Orion drive. Any civilization capable of building such ships would have plenty of time to spread across the galaxy before encountering serious competition, and we can design such ships ourselves already, and likely could also already build one if we really needed to. Now let's say 1,000 civilizations evolved to spacefaring ability over the last 2 billion years. That would mean one new spacefaring species emerged on average every 2 million years, about as long as it takes light to reach Andromeda, our neighboring galaxy. Even without FTL travel, which I'm quite pessimistic about existing, a species only needs to travel at 5% the speed of light to colonize the entire galaxy before the next civilization emerges. To make matters worse, life-bearing planets are becoming more common over time as heavy elements accumulate from dying stars. That means new civilizations aren't evenly distributed over time. The first ones would have emerged with huge head starts, giving them even more time to expand unchecked. It may have been 4 million years between species then and now just a million, for instance. In fact, if a spacefaring species emerged first in Andromeda or another nearby galaxy, it could have reached the Milky Way millions of years ago. Despite the apparent empty space between galaxies, there are still plenty of stars scattered in intergalactic space, just spread out much more thinly, still enough to serve as a bridgehead. If fashion light FTL travel exists, it only amplifies this issue. It would expand the range where we need to consider the rise of alien civilizations, while also accelerating colonization across the universe. This effectively eliminates several Fermi paradox solutions that rely on interstellar travel being impossible or impractical, because even at sublight speeds, an advanced species would have had millions of years to spread and be noticed. One of the amusing things about science fiction expectations is how we tend to assume intelligence evolves frequently, except for biologists, whose field it is, and who are far more skeptical. On the flip side, almost everyone expects warp drive or some other form of FTL travel to be possible, except for us physicists, who overwhelmingly doubt it. In fact, I don't know a single physicist who thinks FTL is likely, even among those who publish theories on how it might be done and try to keep a spark of hope alive that it might be possible. I hope they're right. I think most other physicists do too, but I just don't see it in the cards. That's probably why I find it so easy to believe that some core assumption we have about life, the universe, and everything else is completely wrong, and the real solution to the Fermi paradox is something dumb and obvious once we finally figure out what mistake we've been making. Speaking of assumptions, our third assumption is that it is impossible to know the true intentions of another species. On the one hand, this is trivially true. After all, how can you ever expect to fully understand another's mind with certainty, let alone that of an alien species we know next to nothing about? But the problem is this assumption is both incorrect and ultimately irrelevant. Any spacefaring civilization with interstellar travel would likely have the ability to emulate brains and model sociology with remarkable accuracy, provided they have enough data to work with. In our case, they already have access to decades of radio and television broadcasts, including unscripted content like live news, interviews, and casual conversations. With that kind of data, they could likely build an advanced AI chatbot capable of responding like a default human and mapping out expected behaviors to various scenarios, perhaps even better than we could predict our own. But even setting that aside, this third assumption applies just as much to interactions between humans as it does to aliens. You and I cannot predict each other's actions with certainty, but that doesn't mean the logical next step is a preemptive first strike or total silence. Indeed, historically, calls for those usually come from a lack of certainty or confidence about what the enemy will do, not from true and detailed intel. Knowledge is handy, and the person possessing more of it will generally predict the other person's behavior better. If anything, you can probably guess my behavior better than I can guess yours, especially if you've been listening to these episodes for a long time. I am no actor, and while I put more thought into writing these scripts than in my casual day-to-day decisions and speech, after hundreds of episodes, you've likely developed a pretty good sense of how I think, and the same logic applies to aliens studying our communications. If they've been observing us for a significant period, they wouldn't just be guessing blindly about human nature. They would have solid models for predicting behavior, making the idea of complete uncertainty much weaker than dark force theory assumes, and that's without even including the use of game theory, which is not a reliable predictor of behavior, but certainly is handy when dealing with unknown players whose only trait is that they probably tend to act reasonably logical most of the time. This brings us to the fourth seemingly reasonable assumption, that interstellar warfare or extermination is a viable survival strategy, and while that might be true in some cases, it's also incredibly short-sighted. First off, it's not at all clear why an alien species hiding for its own survival would think that its chances of survival improve by wiping us out. The assumption seems to be that conflict to the point of total extermination, xenocide, is necessary for self-preservation. But why? If you're hiding on your homeworld out of fear that some bigger, badder civilization might wipe you out, how does launching an interstellar war of extermination make you safer? That's not self-preservation, that's drawing attention to yourself. There's nothing even a little subtle about an interstellar spacecraft. Some fusion torch drive ship the size of an aircraft carrier accelerating to relativistic speeds would outshine a lot of planets. Beyond that, extermination as a default survival strategy assumes coexistence is not possible, which might make some grim sense in a galaxy where civilizations are actively competing for every habitable world. But it makes far less sense if all the players are hiding on their homeworlds, since their mere existence does not threaten you. It also doesn't work in a densely populated galaxy with dozens or hundreds of civilizations, because this isn't a one-on-one chess match. If you start exterminating other species, you are effectively broadcasting your hostility to the entire galactic community. Those who disagree with your extermination policy could band together to take you down before you become an unstoppable threat. Even if every civilization shared the belief that preemptive xenocide was necessary, you would still have the problem of becoming the biggest target. The moment you wipe out another species, you've proven that aggressive conquest works, and everyone else has an incentive to take you out while you are weakened and overextended from the conflict, ironically proving that it does not work. And in a no-FTL universe, or even an FTL universe, you're not actually creating a unified galactic empire built on the ruins of alien civilizations. After just a few hundred light years of expansion, your distant colonies wouldn't even be your people anymore. They would be separate factions shaped by different environments, cultures, and possibly even genetic, cybernetic, or neurological modifications. Humans can barely maintain unity on a single planet, given only a few centuries of cultural divergence. Why would a species inclined towards xenocidal conquest tolerate massive divergences within its own population? At some point, those colonies will become as alien to their original civilization as any outside species, and suddenly their parent empire might start seeing them as threats too. If a species is genetically or psychologically hardwired for extermination, that instinct wouldn't stop at external aliens. It would turn inward as soon as enough time, distance, and differences emerged. At that point, they wouldn't be conquering the galaxy, they'd be locked in endless civil wars against their own mutated, cybernetically enhanced, or ideologically divergent offshoots. And if they're not doing that, what the heck do they want with the rest of the galaxy that makes it worth fighting for? And what do they think someone else wants it for so badly that they cower on their homeworld for fear of? Now, one answer to that might be IBCs, Interdiction Bubble Civilizations, but we'll return to that idea in a bit. The other side of this equation is that hiding in space is extremely difficult. We will talk more about concealing civilizations in a moment, but it is important to remember that building space telescopes, or interstellar probes, is far easier than constructing extermination fleets. So if a civilization is capable of launching a galactic-scale war of annihilation, we have to assume they already have plenty of surveillance infrastructure, countless probes and massive space telescopes scanning the cosmos. And given that their prime directive is to seek out new life and destroy it, they're not exactly taking a passive approach. Now you might think, well, that's exactly why civilizations should hide, and sure, that makes sense, except for one major problem. It's too little, too late. You are not trying to hide from some fledgling species that just started listening for radio waves a few thousand years ago. You're dealing with a hyper-advanced civilization that's likely been deploying telescopes for longer than life has existed on land here on Earth. And planets aren't exactly discrete objects. Life-bearing worlds do not look the same as dead ones. Even if a civilization never sent out a single radio transmission, its atmosphere, biosignatures, and thermal emissions would still give it away. This is inevitable as life needs energy to act and will use it, emit waste heat, alter its environment, and so on. A species obsessed with finding life so they can exterminate it isn't going to rely on something as passive as waiting for radio signals. They would be proactively scanning every rocky planet with an atmosphere, leaving no stone unturned. And your radio signals? They've already left the planet. You can't race out and delete them. But it never really mattered anyway, because these hypothetical xenocidal hunters already knew this planet was here long before our ancestors even figured out how to bang flint rocks together to start a fire. The common idea is that aliens go into hiding early on, avoiding detection because they don't want to be the first to stick their heads up and risk playing galactic whack-a-mole with an unknown, potentially hostile civilization. But we need to remember the lessons from The Killing Star, a novel that explored dark force theory decades before Liu Cixin's work. In it, the authors suggest that while we can't assume much about aliens, there are three things that are probably true. First, aliens are not wimps. They either clawed their way to the top of the evolutionary ladder, or, if they are machines, they eliminated the species that created them, the aforementioned badasses. They may be cowardly survivalists like Larry Niven's Puppeteers, or hyper-aggressive warriors like the Kzinti from the same novels. But either way, when push comes to shove, they know how to punch someone's ticket. Second, they want to survive. And they want to survive more than they want us to survive. They might be xenocidal fanatics determined to wipe out all competition, or they could be deeply altruistic, willing to risk their own safety to help others. But at the end of the day, if the choice is them or us, they will choose themselves. Of course, that comes with caveats. Them may not mean their entire species. They might favor one faction over another, even choosing to ally with humans over their own rival civilizations. But survival isn't achieved through indifference. While individuals might be content to drift toward oblivion, civilizations don't work that way. If a species collectively stops caring about its own survival, its civilization will come apart, and sooner or later, some internal or external faction will step in to finish the job, enthusiastically. Fair warning. So they're good at surviving and highly motivated to do so, and the third assumption follows naturally. They will assume we want to survive too. That means in a galaxy where everyone is hiding and no one is actively colonizing, the logical response to detecting a signal would not be to immediately launch an extermination fleet, which would be expensive, slow, and highly visible. Instead, the first response would likely be to do nothing, or to send back a warning, "Shut up, you're going to get yourselves killed." No one is eager to reveal their position by sending an armada, especially when a simple automated relay, positioned far from their homeworld, could warn off newcomers at a fraction of the cost and risk. Any advanced civilization would have thought of that long before resorting to massive military campaigns. another problem with the galaxy-wide fear hypothesis is that if a civilization spent a million years cowering on its homeworld, presumably stockpiling weapons and advancing its technology, then the moment they witnessed a planet getting destroyed, their instincts wouldn't be to keep hiding it, it would be to investigate, and once they found out who did it, they would be strongly inclined to eliminate the culprits, not just out of a sense of justice or revenge, but because they know they could be next. Even if different civilizations have unique moral codes, the concept of justice, karma, and retaliation are likely to be fairly universal among intelligent beings. One of the reasons we can seriously contemplate an alien Cold War is because a hot one seems pretty unlikely to go unnoticed, at least if we consider the kinds of weapons and energies such civilizations might wield. Technologies like antimatter wouldn't just leave a trace, they'd light up the galaxy. But while antimatter makes for a terrifying weapon, it makes an even better fuel source. In my latest Nebula exclusive episode, Antimatter Propulsion, we explore how this volatile substance could one day power our starships, or obliterate them. It's a natural complement to today's episode, the Alien Cold War, where ancient civilizations may be locked in a silent, invisible standoff, waiting for the right moment to act, if they ever do. You can watch Antimatter Propulsion exclusively on Nebula, the creator-owned streaming platform where all my episodes air early and ad-free, along with monthly exclusives and great content from fellow creators like Real Engineering and Up and Atom. While you're there, check out The Sojourn, a Nebula original sci-fi audio drama set in a dangerous, distant star cluster, perfect for fans of deep space intrigue and long-forgotten empires. Head to go.nebula.tv/IsaacArthur and sign up for a lifetime membership. Pay once and enjoy Nebula for as long as you and Nebula exist. For just $300, you'll unlock all my content early and ad-free, including monthly exclusives like Antimatter Propulsion, plus dozens more from the SFIA archive, including extended editions of some episodes. I've been releasing exclusive episodes on Nebula for years, and I plan to keep doing so for years to come. Prefer a lower commitment? You can also subscribe annually for just $36 a year. That's 40% off, and get access to all my episodes, Nebula exclusives, and a vast library of science and sci-fi programming. Now, let's get back to the shadows between the stars. Lastly, civilizations tend to be pro-growth, and those that are not usually get outpaced by those that are, either by external competitors expanding faster or by internal factions pushing for expansion. Growth wins either by making more babies or converting more people, and even a tiny, expansionist faction today could become the dominant force in a few generations, much like compound interest. More importantly, civilization leaders tend to be disproportionately ambitious, aggressive, and confrontational. Throughout history, the people who rise to power are often those who defied the odds and won, even when the risks were high. That mindset is deeply ingrained in leadership cultures, making it hard to imagine a scenario where a civilization's great leaders and visionaries all agree to bunker down on their homeworld indefinitely. Just picture someone going to the major powers on Earth and saying, "Hey, let's bunker up and stay safe on Earth. No boldly going where no one has gone before." That's not exactly an easy sell. And sure, especially when building ships is costly, many civilizations might initially choose to stay put. But even on Earth, where interstellar travel is still theoretical, you don't see many world leaders panicking about the need to stop transmitting signals before the Reapers come for us. And it's not like paranoia is an uncommon trait in leaders either. Now, imagine a civilization has been hiding for 1,000,000 years and still hasn't seen or heard anyone. Don't you think someone would eventually question whether there's actually anything to fear? At some point, someone is bound to suggest that, with all the advanced technology they developed, they could probably race out, settle new worlds, and fortify themselves better than if they just waited for a potential enemy to find them first. And if the galaxy is full of quiet civilizations, then once one breaks the silence, why wouldn't others follow? There's no need to broadcast openly from your homeworld. A civilization could send out robotic interstellar probes, unfold solar panels around distant stars, and relay signals via tight beam communication. If they're really paranoid, they could deploy dozens of such probes in different locations to relay and obscure their origin. After waiting millions of years in hiding, what's another few centuries to ensure that a probe reaches its destination undetected? Given the universe has been around for billions of years, it seems inevitable that some civilizations would have already done this, and once a few take the plunge, others would realize the futility of hiding. At that point, someone would make the case that the civilization that breaks the silence first and starts sending out colony ships will have the biggest head start, and the best chance to claim the largest share of the galaxy. In the end, current science suggests that you can't actually hide. Even if you tried, a more advanced civilization likely saw you long before you even realized you needed to hide, and even if hiding were possible, there is no real long-term reason to do it. Eventually, someone is going to step out of the shadows and take the lead. This is our usual take on dark force theory and the idea of hiding civilizations in general. For a deeper dive into that, see our Hidden Aliens episode. However, we can't assume that our current science will always hold up, or that stealth will remain completely non-viable in the long term. We also don't know that there aren't civilizations out there, bright as daylight, but simply not large or numerous enough for our current, limited detection abilities to have spotted them yet. And of course, we'll be discussing IBC civilizations in a moment. But first, what exactly is a dark galaxy, and how does it differ from dark force theory? Dark galaxy takes the core idea of dark force theory, that civilizations stay silent out of fear of detection, and extends it to an entire galactic ecosystem. Instead of individual species choosing to hide, the galaxy itself has become a place where silence is the dominant survival strategy. In this scenario, civilizations don't just avoid broadcasting signals, they actively suppress any detectable presence, not just to hide from hypothetical predators, but because the entire structure of interstellar interaction has evolved to discourage visibility. This may be as simple as not wanting visitors, thus not broadcasting your existence much to discourage them coming and visiting and bringing their strange ways with them. This doesn't necessarily imply you're a hidden or secret civilization, just a fairly quiet one. One other way this could manifest is through a self-reinforcing Cold War dynamic where civilizations are aware of each other but remain locked in a game of deterrence and passive surveillance. Unlike the classic dark force theory, where every civilization fears extermination from an unknown hunter, a dark galaxy assumes that the hunters have already been identified and accounted for. But instead of engaging in open warfare, they maintain a cold, silent competition of influence and control, both of new alien civilizations and their own outer and divergent colonies. Civilizations might secretly monitor each other, block or jam emerging signals, and even deploy autonomous probes to shut down or neutralize younger species before they attract too much attention. Just as we discussed how probes and communications could be hidden through relay systems, the same could apply to von Neumann berserkers, self-replicating machines designed to locate new civilizations and quietly prepare doomsday invasion forces from concealed asteroid bases. However, even in a scenario where berserker probes exist, their creators would always have to worry that forensic analysis of their attacks could expose them. After all, some civilization might be very determined to investigate, and it's hard to leave no fingerprints, especially on repeat activities, and any mistake could turn a silent Cold War into a very loud one. But there could also be intermediary approaches, a type of diplomatic probe carrying advanced AI, chatbots, or even full copies of brains and entire bureaucracies to negotiate or manipulate a species before they ever reach open space. This leads to a galaxy not of preemptive strikes, but of covert interventions and hidden power struggles. An alien conspiracy theorist's dream come true. The silence we observe might not be because everyone is simply waiting in fear, but because they are actively policing each other, ensuring that no one upsets the delicate balance of power by too much. If a new civilization like humanity suddenly grows too loud, they might not face instant annihilation, but rather subtle suppression, our signals drowned out, our spacefaring efforts subtly undermined, or our expansion restricted by unseen hands. In a dark galaxy, the greatest power isn't in who can shout the loudest, but in who can ensure that no one dares to speak at all. On the surface, this approach doesn't seem too different from dark force theory, and might appear to suffer from the same flaws. However, last year we explored one of the order Fermi paradox ideas, the interdiction hypothesis, which suggests that alien civilizations agree to maintain wide buffer zones of empty space between each other, forming neutral zones to avoid conflict. Around the same time, I had been developing a new hypothesis, the Chronos scenarios, which added an interesting twist. What if civilizations begin fearing that their own interstellar colonies could become the alien threat? At first, you might assume the galaxy is wide open for expansion, with no obvious alien presence nearby, but then, over time, you begin to realize the real alien menace is not external, it's your own colony worlds. Over centuries or millennia, those distant colonies diverge genetically, culturally, and technologically, evolving into something fundamentally different from their parent civilization. You suddenly find yourself surrounded on all sides by what are, for all practical purposes, aliens, and they are only growing stronger. In a classic space opera setting, this realization comes too late. Your single homeworld is now outnumbered by a vast network of breakaway colonies, and you've already lost control. But in a more SFIA-style scenario, the situation is reversed. These colonies, while numerous, remain tiny compared to your core system, where you've had centuries of exponential growth inside a Dyson swarm, amassing quadrillions of people and vastly superior technology. Instead of being trapped and outnumbered, you're actually centralized and positioned to dominate them all. As Rorschach famously said in Watchmen, when confronted by prisoners in the same cell block who wanted the vigilante dead,
"None of you seem to understand. I'm not locked in here with you.
That's it! You're locked in here with me!
A civilization that comes to see its own colonies as a threat to its survival may decide to take drastic action. That action could involve determining the maximum territory it can safely control, securing that area, and then engaging a desert fortress variation of scorched earth to prevent further expansion. To create a buffer zone, it might deploy simple robotic mining fleets to strip nearby star systems of resources, bringing the materials home while simultaneously denying them to potential rivals. Even when mining is no longer economically viable, it still offers military and strategic advantages, not just extracting materials, but ensuring that no hostile force can easily establish itself nearby. So you can send mining probes out at a cost of $11 million apiece to return just $10 million of metal because you can subsidize that from your defense budget, while some fledgling rival colony can't and probably doesn't enjoy the economy of scale you do anyway. This desert fortress approach becomes sustainable long term, and you can keep probes and fleets popping in, even with hibernating crews, to swing by these systems occasionally to pound anybody who is getting too developed, or forcibly migrate them home. And these desert civilizations living on your wasteland fringe might easily number themselves in the billions in a given system and still be nothing your civilization has to worry about as you outnumber them 1,000,000 to 1. This results in what we call an interdiction bubble, and the civilization at center becomes an interdiction bubble civilization, IBC. These could range from a single home system surrounded by a dozen light-years of stripped bare worlds to a vast empire of hundreds of systems enclosed by a far wider buffer zone. It works so long as the region you can mine out and patrol is noticeably wider than the area you can control a prosperous piece of your civilization in. The inner core systems of such a civilization might remain loyal and enthusiastic about the initial reconquest of rebellious colonies, especially if they are larger, wealthier, and more culturally aligned with the homeworld. These core worlds may also recognize that they, too, could one day face the same threat from their own colonies, making them more inclined to support interdiction strategies to maintain long-term stability. That's why we call this the Kronos scenario, named after Kronos, the Greek god who overthrew his father only to fear the same fate from his own children, which ultimately came to pass. In much the same way, a civilization that once expelled or lost control of colonies thousands of light years away might hold a grudge, but over tens of thousands of years, those colonies could grow into mature empires of their own, and by the time they return, the original civilization might have long since forgiven and forgotten the past, only to now fear their own offspring repeating history. And yet even a civilization a few thousand light years from us that had a bubble like this might be invisible to us now, not because they are actually quiet in any way, but just because we could easily miss a Dyson swarm, or even a few hundred altogether, at that distance and with modern tech. We suggested we might have had 1,000 civilizations arise in this galaxy earlier. And if we had, and even if most had kicked out a few splinter civilizations that replicated their feat elsewhere, that's still such a low density that even if every one of them claimed 1,000,000 star systems, only about 1% of the stars in this galaxy would be in their combined bubbles. Now, as we discussed before, they have some motivation to consider long-term hibernation, since this does not imply that they are going completely on ice, just that a lot of their people are sitting on their stockpiles of resources, awaiting a later epoch of the universe where things are quarter and calculation or post-biological thought is way cheaper. This notion is hardly without its flaws, but it does check most of the core boxes for a decent Fermi paradox solution, and it breathes some interesting new life into hidden civilization and dark galaxy options. For one thing, outside of those interdiction bubbles, nobody is being allowed to build Dyson swarms, starlift their suns, or disassemble entire planets, at least not anywhere near an existing IBC. Too dangerous. They might not be obliterated, incidentally. They might just have that gear confiscated or wrecked and be told to knock it off or come live inside the IBC, or to move further away beyond the IBC outreaches. Or they might be normal thriving colonies on planets, but war fleets from the IBC show up occasionally to knock over anything too ambitious or impose a tax or a tithe, flex muscles, or just glass the planet. There is room for shades of grey here, even if the nicer options are still pretty bad. These boundaries could be pretty large and vague too, and in their outskirts you might even have planets like Earth form and grow, and a few of the neighboring IBCs might be involved quietly and have different motives. Even a nastier one might move to help us because we were closer to another IBC than them, and they thought us becoming our own IBC might pose a strategic advantage. Space isn't static either, so we could migrate over several million years in or out of a given IBC. I try to picture what a galaxy would look like if a few thousand civilizations had arisen and gradually converged towards this IBC existence, each watching over a few million stars, but generally controlling only a few hundred. The rest of their claimed space would be filled with splinter civilizations, ancient war machines, autonomous harvesters, and even other species, perhaps ones they engineered long ago or that drifted in as refugees from distant conflicts. The longer such a system persists, the more likely it is that these desolation zones will expand, and that the automated systems designed for plundering or culling them will continue to grow. Ironically, planets might actually be the safest places to be in such a galaxy. Most default automated probes would likely use ion drives or similar propulsion systems, which cannot escape planets, only asteroids and small moons. There's little motivation to equip them with powerful engines, since their main job is not direct extermination. It's identifying active civilizations and relaying that information home. If a planet is detected as an emerging threat, an actual invasion fleet could be sent later, if necessary. But in many cases, these civilizations are not necessarily bloodthirsty conquerors. They only care about managing their neighbors near their main resource zones to ensure nobody expands into their territory or builds doomsday weapons pointed in their direction. There are weapon systems allowed under known science that can be fired from one star system at another and with decent accuracy. Odds are technology and time will let us dream up even better ones. And they aren't truly hidden, just hidden from us now. They know each other exist and likely exchange messages or send envoys occasionally. A few thousand light years is too vast a distance for regular diplomatic communication, but it's enough to maintain awareness of each other's presence and to allow for loose, pragmatic understandings between IBCs. It also opens the door to Cold War-style behavior, albeit on an immensely long timescale. Instead of direct warfare, IBCs might engage in covert strategies, such as uplifting a species on a distant planet just to create problems on a rival's border. If positioned carefully, this new civilization would be too far away for immediate suppression, but close enough to become a long-term threat. The neighboring IBC would be forced to deal with it, but acting too aggressively could risk upsetting other IBCs in the region, making the situation a delicate and complex balancing act. How would that work? Well, we often see sci-fi depictions of alien agents covertly interfering with Earth, but we can think bigger. An IBC might establish a hidden colony inside a cometary body within a target system, allowing them to monitor the progress of an uplifted species while remaining largely undetected. This colony could spend most of its time in hibernation, waking only when intervention is necessary. From there, they might clear out or sabotage the usual swarms of autonomous harvesters and murder bots that tend to infest asteroids and small moons near civilized space in the galaxy. By removing these obstacles, they could ensure the new species had a better chance of survival, all while maintaining plausible deniability and keeping their true motives hidden from rival IBCs. or even from internal factions, because within an IBC there could be power struggles among its own members. After all, we are likely talking about empires of quintillions, possibly with nigh-immortal post-biological rulers dueling over millennia. Then there are all the pocket kingdoms living in the desolation zones, which could number in the millions or even billions. Now imagine that we exist on the border of an IBC about 1,000 light-years away, made up of just a handful of Kardashev 2 core systems. Surrounding it, however, are a million claim systems, each scattered with bunker settlements ranging from a few dozen to tens of millions of inhabitants. Some might align with the core empire, while others might hate each other more bitterly than they hate the giants at the center. It's not hard to imagine power plays happening here, nor the fear of getting caught. Some factions might want to help us, others might want to eliminate us to prevent another IBC from rising and further squeezing them out. Some might even want to quietly take over, setting us up as a puppet IBC, or even a real one, since their focus might not be on a species at all, but on ideology and control. Now, to be fair, this all works far better as the setup for great fiction than as a serious Fermi Paradox solution, for reasons I'll detail in a moment, and incidentally, feel free to steal and adapt this IBC Dark Galaxy notion. Even if I ever do write a novel myself, I'll never have a chance to use all the ideas we discuss in these episodes. But I always love hearing when someone publishes a story inspired by these concepts. I use sci-fi topics here as a way to discuss science and the future in an engaging way, and I'm content to let others write the next great stories for us all to enjoy. Actually, content isn't quite the right word, smug might be better. I've been encouraged to share more personal things in these episodes, to humanize myself, I suppose, amusingly at the same time I was encouraged to cut down on tangents during the episode. So here's one. I have a little shelf in my office that's filled with books from authors who've sent me copies, thanking me for inspiring their work or for helping their research with an episode. I cherish them like I do notes from audience members telling me they graduated or wrote their thesis or started a company or that went IPO. The book collection ranges from new writers to bestsellers these days, and I've taken to calling it my smug shelf, akin to the I Love Me walls that many of us have for the various plaques and honors we've accumulated. And today, while my daughter Isabella and I were cleaning and reorganizing my office while I had writer's block, that shelf ended up expanding to a second one, since the books had started piling up there. Now my other shelves are a worse mess, since partway through, regarding all the sci-fi novels I was moving around and thinking on while doing it, my block dropped and I abandoned the shelves. Tangent complete. Anyway, as we often discuss with hidden civilizations, if you truly want to be left alone, it's far more effective to put up a big no trespassing sign and a fence than to simply stay quiet in the forest and hope no one stumbles in. Because if they do, you're left with three options: deal with them diplomatically, send them home, or quietly eliminate them. And even that last probably wrecks your secrecy, but the other two certainly do. And if you choose that latter but didn't leave any warning signs, you might end up with a follow-up investigation, in the form of an angry armada demanding payback for their missing explorers. In nature, territory is not hidden, it is loudly announced. Predators and rivals prefer to avoid unnecessary fights, and clear warnings prevent dangerous conflicts before they start. So too, there tend to be escalation levels for conflicts. That same logic should apply to interstellar civilizations. Better to make your presence known and deter threats rather than risk misinterpretation and retaliation. And when you do escalate, do it in steps, not all the way to extermination. But that's part of what makes the Fermi Paradox solution a bit more plausible. These civilizations do not broadcast loudly, not out of fear, but because it's expensive and they simply don't care. Communications are sent through efficient tight beam systems, and they have little interest in the broader galaxy since they cannot expand further or exploit it meaningfully. Any potential threats that do arise would likely emerge slowly and visibly, giving them plenty of time to identify and handle them before they became a real danger. And none of this ends at the galaxy's edge either, because it's a convergent state that civilizations everywhere in the universe eventually drift toward. Even those doing it for 1 billion years might not really be much stronger than those newcomers of 1 million years ago, but may use that advantage to help ensure the state of play continues, as they believe in it and after all this time are not open to thinking that there are any other paths that would invalidate their eons of effort and sacrificing their chance at a galaxy-sprawling empire. To some of them, the threat of a new IBC might be far less of interest than the possibility something else might emerge that was bigger and better, and that may be the threat they ruthlessly deploy against. And they might always be ruthlessly fighting internally too, with rebels popping up to fight for new ideas and playing shadow games on proxy planets. Part of how they might manage these threats is through fleets, covert agents, or entire cold wars between empires, all focused on outright obliteration and more on subtle shifts in the balance of power. The long-term goal isn't immediate dominance, it's surviving to the degenerate or dark eras of the universe, much like we discussed in our Civilizations at the End of Time series. The universe is vast, old, and silent, or so it seems. Perhaps that silence is not the absence of life, but the quiet hum of a billion unseen conflicts. A cold war not of nations, but of entire species, where ancient empires move unseen in the shadows of time, shaping the fates of younger civilizations like ghosts haunting a battlefield long since abandoned. To us, the galaxy appears empty, but what if it is not? What if the darkness is not an abyss, but a veil, one made opaque simply because of the sheer enormity of space? If we are not alone, if there truly are vast and dormant empires out there, watching, waiting, what does that mean for us? Are we just another piece on a cosmic chessboard, a pawn oblivious to the game being played around us? Or are we the next contender, the rising force that may one day tip the balance in ways none of them expect? If so, will we be welcomed, warned, or wiped away before we even realize the game has begun? Perhaps we will never know, perhaps our fate is already sealed, or perhaps, as with all great empires before us, our moment is yet to come. But if there is one lesson history teaches us, it is that no wall holds forever, no silence lasts unbroken, and no power, no matter how ancient, can remain unchallenged forever. If the galaxy is locked in a cold war, then one day, inevitably, the war must end, and when it does, we may find that we were never meant to be mere observers, but the next great force to enter the fray.